Welcome to the Real Chili Podcast.
And the Golden Eagles of Marquette University in Milwaukee are bound for the Final Four for only the third time ever.
5 seconds left. Marquette down by one, trying to avoid the upset. Blue the drive, the left hand. It's good. 1 second to play. Vander Blue has put Marquette in front by one.
And I want to win every day as basketball players, as students, and I want to win every day, most importantly, as people.
From the desert sands of Arizona to the mean streets of Waukesha, and of course everywhere in between, this is the Real Chili Podcast. Welcome on a Championship Sunday edition. That's when we're recording here. I am Brian Henry, joined alongside by Mr. Jonathan Fick. John, how are you on this beautiful Sunday?
I have no complaints, Brian. None at all.
Well, you have a little bit of a complaint. You probably wish your football team was playing today. Just a little small piece of you. Come on, you're used to that.
Yeah, I guess, but I've got a lot extra time. Don't have to worry about what happens. It's nice.
That's true. We'll all be locked in to watch potentially with Brady's injury, 4 miserable quarterbacks play today and not do anything remotely positive.
Hey, don't bad talk Blake Bortles.
Yeah, you don't come here for our lousy football analysis. You stay for our lousy Marquette basketball analysis. So here we are. I don't know if we can officially call this a bye week, John, but Marquette's got 8 days between games. Their most recent being DePaul a week ago. They're getting ready and set to play Xavier. So it felt like a good time to take a step back and hop on that elevator that goes up to about 10,000 feet and look down at where we are. And I think there's some critical questions that are worth being asked and some thoughts that I know that you have with where they are in this situation. So let's start with the facts, shall we, if you're so inclined to hear them. You good with that?
Yeah, let's bring on the facts, Brian. Bring on the facts.
All right, so let's start there. All right. The team is currently 13-6 overall in the season. They are 4-3 in the Big East Conference. As of record time, that's good for being tied for 5th. Averaging a little over 83 points a game, giving up just under 80, and we've got 2 20-plus point per game scorers. You heard that correctly. Marcus Howard's over 21, Andrew Rousey is over 20, and Sam Hauser coming in at a cool 15 points per game. So hearing all that, big picture, before we get into specifics, John, has it gone the way you expected it to go?
Absolutely. Which is sort of like makes me sound like I was Nostradamus or something at the beginning of the season. But you look at this team and
I agree with you. I think they are what they are in a good way.
Absolutely, but I mean, you look at this team and it's constituted very similarly to the way it was last year. You sort of knew how the offense was going to run. You knew what you had in the offense. The question was always, are they going to be able to get enough stops to be competitive? You run through the non-conference, and there's a limit to how much you can learn about a team when they're playing, teams like Chicago State. But we didn't really expect to be beating Wichita State or Purdue, and both of those teams are in the top 10 now, and we got kind of beat and abused by both of them. You get a disappointment against Georgia, a spectacular win against Wisconsin that's looking less and less spectacular with every passing Badger loss. You get through the non-conference and you think to yourself, yeah, this team is what we thought they were, a team that can possibly shoot their way past anybody, is pretty small down low, and is going to be pretty well suited to be on the bubble come March, I think, is sort of the takeaway from the non-con. You get into the conference schedule and you put up a fight against Xavier and you think, oh, maybe they got something here. A great win against Seton Hall and you think maybe they got something here. And they go to follow that up by going to Butler and getting run out of the gym, and you remember, oh yeah, that's sort of what we got with this team. It's you get some spectacular highs and some absolutely hair-pulling frustrations too.
In a good way, John, though, I think the floor has been raised from where it was a year ago, despite playing pretty much the same way. Are you of that same opinion?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we went to Villanova and we lost by 10. They're the number 1 team in the country. You think you scored 90 points against Nova. You think you got a shot there. You think you're playing pretty well. I mean, they only lost by 10. I think last year's team, fluky win against Nova aside, I do think you're right. This team from this year has more depth and more consistency. They can still catch fire and become world beaters. They can still go ice cold and get beat by by a lot of teams. But I don't foresee a ton of. I hope, fingers crossed, I don't foresee dropping something that they a gimme the rest of the way.
That's a terrific synopsis. Let's get into a few of the specifics. First question I will ask you, and I'll answer this first one, John. Biggest individual surprise this season based on players on the team. We all knew that Rousey and Howard were going to be huge contributors and possibly the 2 leading scorers on the team. I don't think anyone out there thought they were both going to be 20-plus point per game guys. And basically have both had it going, or one's been able to pick up for the other at different points this season. To have played 19 games and see them both over 20, that to me, I sit back and go, wow.
It's a lot of production, consistent production, because, too many... The way averages work, obviously, there's Mr. Math telling you that you lay a couple of eggs and it's hard to it can really suck an average down. I mean, they've been pretty effective each and every time on the floor.
But to that point, each of them have had a couple of egg-laying performances. Rousey couldn't get a shot off for a couple games. Howard was lousy the first couple games of Big East play and then flipped the switch and did what he's done. I mean, they have had a couple clunkers but have come back from it and immediately gotten what you're used to from them, which I think has been incredibly impressive, considering defenses are designed to slow them down.
Absolutely.
And their physical limitations.
The other thing that I think is absolutely insane, and it just serves to remind you how special of a season we're having. I mean, maybe this doesn't go deep into March or something like that, but what a ride it's been. They've had so many 30-point performances. I feel like we go... it's not uncommon to go an entire season without a 30-point performance, maybe one 30-point performance. I think it's been 9 this season. I mean, to the point where you're starting to think, oh yeah, that's just how they score. So one of those two is going to go off for 30, and then Hauser sneaks in and hangs 30 as well. You've got so much individual firepower, and when and it looks like they've got that kind of streak shooting instinct where once the shots start falling, they're going to keep putting them up, and then they just keep falling. They keep pouring it on. It's really fun to watch.
How about for you? What would you say has been your biggest individual surprise this season? In line with those two or somebody else?
No, I actually think Greg Elliott is. I was able to do this thing where I went to a team dinner with a bunch of the players were there.
Okay. You can drop names and tell us you're part of the elite alumni group that supports. You can do that.
Well,
make the rest of us feel small and unimportant, but that's fine.
I snuck in some sort of a season ticket holder event, and I clearly didn't belong because I saw judges and other people who are movers and shakers, and then there's me, and I sat at the table with Theo John. And
don't sell yourself short, John. You're an incredible slouch.
I am an incredible slouch. I sat at this table with Theo John and got to chat with him, and he was great. But you could sitting with him, you felt like that dude was a D1 athlete, a big dude. And then at the next table over was Greg Elliott, and I'm like, who let this little kid in here? He was, he doesn't look like he's going to be a bruiser, but he has really, really been an integral part of all of this team's success, especially after Cheatham transferred, because he's got the length and, passing lane disruptive instincts necessary to change the complexion of the perimeter defense. And without his contribution, I don't think that we're having this conversation and saying we're a bubble team. I just don't. And I think he may be the best of the 3 freshmen at the moment. He's been very effective and and improving markedly as the season goes on. Now you can tell that Wojo is leaning on him and to a lesser extent Jamal Cain for big important minutes in big important games, and not treating them like freshmen at all. So seeing their improvement to becoming, a contributor at this point, that's, I think, my biggest surprise.
John summed up the impact of the freshmen exceptionally well there, especially Greg Elliott, who has come on tremendously. He's playing over 22, 23 minutes a game in conference play so far, so clearly Wojo is getting more confident with him and is giving him more minutes and rewarding him. So I agree with you wholeheartedly there, John. Not to get super negative on it, but it is worth looking and discussing from a biggest disappointment standpoint for me, John. You already mentioned it. It's the transfer of Hanif Cheatham. This was one of our most experienced players coming into the season for a team that was pretty devoid of lots of collegiate experience. He had started a whole bunch of games, had a lot of success at different moments, and it's too bad. Now, I know he had a family issue, and I do not begrudge him at all for the decision, but just as in a vacuum, looking at having a guy like that and then not having him, I think it's disappointing that it just didn't work out with Hanif Cheatham. But they have recovered from losing him pretty admirably.
They absolutely have, and to some extent, his position was maybe the position they could most afford to lose somebody.
Agreed. Yes, they could
because Elliott and Cain were waiting in the wings, and
Sakar. Give Sakar's fit in admirably in the starting lineup in his spot.
Absolutely, and all three of those guys can bring length to the defensive end of the floor, which is sorely lacking when you're running out Rousey and Howard. You give up something in length, and it's probably a valuable, a net positive trade-off because of their offensive contributions. But I wasn't necessarily expecting Cheatham to be the number 1, 2, 3, or 4 offensive option maybe, but defensively he could have played a huge role, and he can't now because he's not on the team. But luckily there have been other guys who've stepped up, tables set for them, and they've responded, and I think that's a huge positive for the program generally to be able to weather kind of this adverse event.
You and I were talking before we started recording, and I threw the question at you, who's the 4th leading scorer on the team right now? And I agree with you. I don't think the top 3 spots of who's getting the ball and taking shots, no way they change, even if he stayed. But I think he would have held that 4th scoring option card and hummed somewhere between 8 and 9 points a game. Right now, Sakar is the 4th leading scorer on the team at a little over 6. So you kind of there's maybe a few baskets that are being left out there without him, but I agree with you, and we're going to look more to the future here in just a moment. I think the opportunity it's afforded the freshman and a guy like Sakar in the long run, it's going to pay larger dividends. Next question I want to throw out there. I think I know the answer. I think there's only one answer, so I'm curious if you have another, John. Which loss would you like to have back most?
Oh, start with you. Xavier at the Xavier loss at the Bradley Center. We had that game right in our reach, and that Xavier team has all the trappings of being a legitimate Final Four contender, and we, to quote the great public speaker Denny Green, we let them off the hook.
We did. We didn't make stops. We didn't play well enough to win that game.
No, we didn't. But we.
That's 100% my. So I'm actually going to have a different game for you.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let me guess. I think you know what it is. Give me one guess.
Georgia.
Absolutely. Georgia was a team that I think 8 times out of 10 were better than at home. We played that game at an incredibly slow pace. It was exactly the way they wanted to play it. It was probably the most uncharacteristic game of the season. Maybe others have a different opinion of that, but they took Marquette completely out of the way that they wanted to play, and it ended in now Georgia's not terrible. They're in the top half of the SEC, but that's a game they should have had. It's a team they're better than, especially at home. That to me is the one that you plug that extra win on there. No, it doesn't drastically change RPI and things. I don't know. You just feel better about it. That's just me.
I agree. I mean, and part of building a tournament resume is taking care of the business that you ought to take care of. You know, this isn't. We knew that this was going to be kind of a bubbly team, and going in and you're looking at the schedule and you think if we just take care of the teams that we ought to beat, and you maybe steal a couple here and there that you shouldn't, and you're in great shape. But then you dig yourself a little bit of a hole when you don't take care of the business you need to take care of. You know, we maybe kind of made our path a little bit harder by losing to Georgia, but you're right. I don't think that
it's not a devastating loss, but I don't know, it just irks me. Every time I look at the schedule and I go, "Oh, that's right, we lost to Georgia. That sucks." That's kind of my assessment of it.
Yeah, I think that's probably pretty fair.
You remember if I remember the year 2013 when we made the Elite Eight. Do you remember the horrible loss we had? I think around December of non-conference play that year. Went on the road up to Green Bay. I do remember that team. Lost some ridiculous 49-47 game, and it just infuriated you. Because it wasn't going to keep us out of the tournament, but it was like, holy crap, we went up to Green Bay and got beat and didn't score 50 points. Georgia's not that type of infuriating. It's just it's like it's a mosquito bite. It just bugs you, and you move on. It'll heal, and it's not going to keep them out. But if I had to pick one, that's the one I'd like to have back. John, obviously, going with the Xavier game. Totally understandable. John, you led me into the transition to the next point here. So you pointed out the games you're supposed to get, right? All right, question for you. There are 4 games remaining against DePaul, Georgetown, and St. John's. Will Marquette go 4-0 against those 3 teams? Second question, do they have to go 4-0 against those teams?
I think they do go 4-0 against those teams. I don't think they can sleepwalk through any of them.
No,
and
they can't.
They kind of sleepwalked. It felt like their way through DePaul at home the other day.
Thank God DePaul is as bad as they are. Oh my God,
absolutely. But I don't.
Who shoots under 20% from the floor?
DePaul.
Doesn't it feel like they've shot under 20% from the floor since 2005?
They shot 18% in the first half.
Why can't they get anything right there? Send them to the Missouri Valley Conference. My Lord, isn't everybody tired of watching DePaul? I'm sorry. They are maddening that they are still in this league and that they still haven't figured it out to find a way to be competitive every once in a while. DePaul. Sorry, DePaul rant done. I'm just tired of watching DePaul. But I'm still terrified that we're going to lose a game to them when we have to go there in a few weeks because it just feels like we're erratic enough where we could lose to one of these. I mean, St. John's can't beat anybody. They're 0-8 as of press time right now. 0-8.
I know, but again, it's not like that they don't have athletes. And one of the things I think that this Marquette team, is vulnerable to is on ball pressure defensively, because it can disrupt the ability of maybe it's a quarter of a second timing off on a swing pass or a pick and roll, or I don't know, but it just seems that the teams that really frustrate us do so with length and athletic ball pressure, and I feel like St. John's can do that. Maybe they won't, maybe they haven't, but they're not a gimme in the same way that playing a SWAC team is the gimme.
Agreed.
And so I think that Marquette ought to win all 4 of those games. I think if they don't, they're not screwed, but I don't think that it makes it a lot harder. It makes it so that you gotta go and steal one against Xavier. You gotta take care of a tougher game against Butler at home, and Butler showed that they have kind of had our number. I mean, I don't want to be hanging our hopes on being making sure that we beat Creighton twice or something. I just would much rather take care of business.
You transition it to our final big picture topic. There. I mean, the goal, I think we all agree, the goal of the season is to make the NCAA tournament. I don't think there's any middle ground to that. It's make the NCAA tournament. That constitutes a successful season, right? So you have this week off, and you got time to sit and look at where you are, what you've done, and where you're going, right? You've got 11 conference games left. All right, 4 of them are against these, let's be fair, I don't want to call Georgetown miserable. Georgetown's bad. DePaul and St. John's are miserable. All right, you got 4 games left against them. And that means you got to play 7 teams that are at your level or above in league play, right? So that's Creighton, that's Butler, that's Xavier, that's Villanova. There's good teams that you've got to play down the stretch, and you've got to find a way to beat them. You know, this stretch is great. I think it's wonderful to have to get this little week off here, and now it's Xavier and Villanova back to back. Find a way, right? Like I'm not going to be blown away or extremely disappointed if they lose both games, even if they lose both games convincingly. But it's weird that, John, and I'm curious if you feel the same way, I think they've gotten to a point where I think they can get one of these. And I'll be disappointed if they don't get one. I know it's not probable. I can't totally explain the rationality of it, but I think they've reached a point where find a way to get one of these 2 games. Give yourself, help yourself out.
I mean, you said they didn't play well enough to win against Xavier at home, and
they played well enough on one side of the floor, they didn't on the other.
And they didn't play well enough to win at Villanova, but they acquitted themselves respectably. They've put themselves in a position where they're a credible threat to beat both of those teams at home. I think that they ought to be, a relatively sizable dog in both of them, because both of those teams are better than Marquette, and I don't think there's any argument to that front. But if Marquette is sitting at 4-3 in the conference, they take care of those 4 games against the DePaul, St. John's, Georgetown crew, then they're at 8 wins, and you've got a decent chance to get that 9th win, 10th win. You get there, it doesn't have to be against Xavier or Nova. You get you get revenge against Butler at home. Maybe you scratch out Creighton on senior night, and you're playing into that 9-10 win zone with some room to spare. And I think 10 wins in the Big East gets you in the dance.
Gets you in, yeah.
And so
the goal to me is not going into the Big East tournament needing to get 1 or 2. That to me is the goal. And I think 10-8 probably does that. 11-7 guarantees it.
I agree. And I mean, if you're looking at the schedule ahead, you got to think that, and all the guys on this podcast have been beating the drum that the opening conference schedule for Marquette is significantly harder than the tail, and that sets up well because of the what have you done for me lately nature of Selection Sunday. And, coming out of this stretch, going into this 2-game stretch against Xavier and Nova, to be at 4-3, I think you're in pretty good shape. They're in striking distance of being able to start talking about seeding instead of talking about selection. But that only really holds if they take care of the business they got to take care of.
So those are kind of the big picture looks at the season. There's plenty of more. We won't bore you with every single inch of it. Again, Marquette's next game will be Xavier. We're going to get into that here in just a segment. But before we do that, as an add-on to my rant about how awful DePaul is, John, you are as you've already reminded us on this podcast, you are an elite season ticket holder, and are of high standing in the Marquette basketball community. Are you not?
Well, I'm a season ticket holder. The rest of that description is
don't act. No. I'm going to stop you there. Don't act like you're not. So as a result, you are at the vast majority of home games. The only member of the Real Chili podcast contribution team that regularly is able to attend games. Although shouts to next weekend against Villanova, the vast majority of us will be there. So very excited for that. But in your time in the stands, it's not always about the game on the court.
It usually is, but then again, you don't usually play DePaul. And the game against DePaul, as everyone has pointed out,
DePaul brings out the best of fans, correct?
It brings out the best of fans. It also presented a product on the floor that was, shall we say, not incredibly compelling. And so I was lucky enough to be treated to a show of a different kind, and I really think that I got my money's worth out of my ticket price for the day. So
please do tell.
A couple rows in front of my seats, nobody had bothered to attend because Bradley Center attendance is a well trodden path on this show, is sort of leaves something to be desired.
Averaging a little over 12,000 a game. We can do better.
And in any case, it's probably let the under 4, maybe the under 8 timeout in the first half, and 4 young ladies show up and take their seats. And let's just say they drew a little bit of attention because, charitably speaking, let's say they weren't dressed for the weather, if you know what I mean.
Okay, understood.
So, when 4 young ladies in spaghetti strap tank tops sit down in the middle of the Milwaukee winter, say it draws the eye. Would you say that's probably fair, Brian?
That's understandable. I can see how that goes. Now, these are students that we think, or these are just anybody?
I think students, but they might have been recent grads. I'm not sure. It's not like I asked to see their student IDs.
Copy that. So anywhere in the neighborhood of young drinking age, college to recently graduated college.
Yeah, this is 22 to 24 years old, maybe. In any case, they sit down, they start playing on their phones or whatever, and I return my attention to the riveting basketball on the floor. At halftime,
God, screw you, DePaul. You're awful. Sorry, continue.
At halftime, I get up, stretch my legs, come back, and I see that the girl on the far end was kind of slumped over, and I thought to myself, oh, she's a millennial, very deep in her phone. Just gotta focus on her Snapgrams and her Insta chats and all that good stuff.
Let the record show that you are a millennial yourself. So this kind of millennial on millennial crime here I find it a little disturbing. But continue.
In any case, game starts, and I realize she hasn't moved for a while. So I snap a photograph and send it to the guys and just say that at least one person here is passed out. And the best response was a friend of ours says, I love how her friends just don't seem to care. Oh, that's Becky. She can't sit up, but she's fine. Her friends keep hanging out. They reach over, they commandeer this girl's beer. I mean, they've basically left her for dead at this point.
So I have a critical question to ask. So at halftime, we didn't have a problem. When we got back from halftime, there was noticeably a problem. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I think so. I think she probably passed out or started the passing out procedure just as halftime was beginning. But she was well and truly out by the time the second half tipped.
Let's be honest. We've all been there at one time or another. We've seen the fellow Marquette student next to us be there at one time or another. It's really how your friends react in that moment that you truly judge the character of the company you keep. And that's where I'm fascinated as to where this goes. All right, so we're back from halftime. What happens?
We're back from halftime, and her friends commandeer this girl's beer. So that's the character of her friends. They looked over and they said, Becky's not drinking that beer. I'm drinking that beer.
A good step in the right direction. Okay.
Of course, then they continued to ignore her as she continues to slump further and further over. And to the point where it's actually kind of comical. People around the area are kind of remarking. You could hear the whole crowd is really keyed in on this moment. And
because God knows they are not watching basketball at this point.
And the bald, there's a guy sitting right in front of her who's kind of bald, and led to a solid observation that it's only a matter of time before he gets a vomit toupee.
Now, this was pointed out via text message, and I gotta say, I was riveted by this. Like I was all in on, oh my God, I need the next update as to what's going to happen here.
And it had all the drama of 3 lead changes in the last 2 minutes of a NFC of a playoff game. It had drama, it had stakes, it was remarkable. She was out cold, and all of a sudden, boom, there's security. She's getting a talking to. She's getting carded. I'm thinking for sure she's gonna get perp walked right out of the section.
They're throwing her out, no question. And her and her friends, you guys gotta go.
She perks up, she pulls out her ID, she talks to the security guard, and I'm certain she's getting perp walked, and then the guy's satisfied. He gets up and he leaves, and I went, oh my God, she talked her way out of it. This is a comeback of a century.
That is a Minnesota Viking-like turnaround. That is just amazing.
The thing is, though, the sealer would have been if Stephon Diggs had gone full Leon Lett at the end of that play. That's how this is how this goes down. So I'm buzzing because this girl talked her way out of it.
About how much time is left in the half at this point?
Maybe about 6 to 8 minutes.
All right, so the game is over. DePaul has rolled over like the dogs they are. Everybody knows who's winning. So I'm sure the crowd is beginning to thin out at this point.
A little bit, I guess, but not too terribly much. But what's incredible, and I can even look at the timestamps, 9:31, security just came, carded her. 9:33, talked her way out of it. 9:33, and she puked. She talked her way out of it. She gets this close to the end zone for the Music City Miracle, and then she Leon Letts all over the floor.
This is very important. Did she stand and do it, or was she still sitting? Was it full projectile or like into hands? Like how would you describe how it went down?
So her friends, I think, realizing that they had just dodged a bullet, were like, "All right, Becky, we gotta get going here," you know. And so they get up and they walk away, and they left her behind. And
what?
Because but then they realize she's not moving, and they stop in the stair, like in the aisle, and I think, oh, she passed out again. They're just gonna leave her for dead, and that's when I saw her like convulsing as she was just puking at the floor, like puking at her feet.
Oh no! And how did the bald guy in front of her take it?
Oh, they moved. I've never seen anybody move quite as fast. They really cleared the room. And her friends come and collect her, and they get her out of there. And
like, are we talking like, is she like she's got two people under her arms dragging her up the steps type of thing, or is she walking on her own?
No, she's walking on her own. She really, I don't know what it was. She couldn't.
Is she playing it cool at this point?
Oh yeah, she walked out like nothing had happened. Just
wow, what a champ.
You know, it was really remarkable. She couldn't keep her eyes open, her head up straight, but then she could talk her way out of talk down the security guy. Then she couldn't not puke, but then she was able to stand up and walk out under her own power. So, you know, what I'm trying to say here is that when the basketball game is ugly, every once in a while, you're treated to...
And when DePaul's involved, it's going to be.
Every once in a while at the Bradley Center, you're treated to a show of a different kind. And if you think that you're going to get that on Fox Sports 1, listen to Dickie Simpkins, you're not. Get to the stadium.
You're not going to get anything listening to Dickie Simpkins. All you're going to get is #Splash. Ooh, God. Uncle Dickie. Uncle. John Fick, tremendous story. That was beautiful. That's why the people stuck around here and listened. We wrap it up with this. Xavier, coming up Wednesday in Cincinnati. Your Skyline chili sucks. So does JP Marcura. John, how does Marquette get a win in this game?
They got to do everything that they did in the first game and tack on a few more stops. You know, play bigger down low. I mean, they really need to just somehow manage to get stops. Like this is the hard hitting analysis that you get.
Do we see Wojo use the bigger lineup that he found success with against Villanova, used against Seton Hall? Obviously didn't work out well against Butler, but he has been using it now in the last 4 games. Do you think he rides that against Xavier?
I think you have to. They have enough length and size. I mean, someone's got to man up Blewett. Someone's got to – I mean, you've got to get contributions out of people with that stand taller than 6 feet on the defensive end, and they just have to get productive stop minutes out of Elliott and Kane. I think that they're both going to get leaned on heavily if we have any chance of success.
Agreed. I am all in on the Andrew Rousey, JP Markura boxing match that I hope takes place at some point in the first half, and I hope the referees treat it like Robert Parrish, Bill Lambier in like 1987 and just leave everybody in the game and let them swing it out, because that is what the people need. Their fans hate Rousey. We hate Markura. They hate each other. Let's make this happen. It has to happen.
Yeah,
it was so close. It was so close to happening in the first game. So close.
That flop was just.
It was, Manu Ginobili stood up and was applauding. It was just amazing, just amazing.
I guess. I mean, I gotta. Unless Procuro wants us to believe that he's made of Downey, no one. I don't think Rousey can hit anybody and make them fly that, like, legitimately fly off their feet like that. He's just not that big.
He's 5'10", 190 pounds. Let's not, and I'm probably being generous at 190, probably closer to 180. Folks, that is it for this, again, bye-week edition of the Real Chili Podcast. John, thank you for your presence and your storytelling. It truly was a spectacular week.
Thanks for having me, Brian. It's always a pleasure.
Always is. Marquette and Xavier on Wednesday. We'll talk to you after that one. Ring out a Hoya. Again, Skyline Chili still sucks. Good day, everybody.